Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, elephants, protecting Asia's gentle giants, presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Surya Ramachandran. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you all so much for joining us here today. Over to you, Surya.
Thank you so much, Rob. Hello, everyone. I'm joining in from India, right amongst elephant country, so it seems the apt setting to talk about these gentle giants, the creatures I call my neighbors, where I live in South India. And they're also a part of a couple of the NatHab trips that we do in India, so I thought it was important that we get to know them as well as possible before we see them. Okay, so sorry about my webcam. I live in a very remote location, so I just want to put my face over there so that people know who is which is the face attached to the voice who's addressing them now. The network here is a little low, so I've kept my webcam off at the moment. Okay, so before we talk about protecting elephants, let's try to get to know them a little bit better. And keeping that in mind, let's go through the three maps that we have here. On the top left, the green and red is the range. The green one is the African elephant, and the red is the Asian elephant. Okay. And if you come within the Asian elephant, the map below on the bottom left, you'll see where Asian elephants are found within South and Southeast Asia. So there are a lot of subspecies. Some people call them pygmy elephants in Borneo. Some people call them forest elephants in the Congo in Africa. But they're all essentially two species, African elephants and Asian elephants, at the moment at least, as according to science. Zooming in more on the third map, that is the map on the right, you'll see where elephants occur within India. So basically in the southwest, south central, along the Himalayan foothills, almost all over India, Nepal. Nepal is not marked here, but the discontinuous patch in the northernmost blue patches, that is Nepal between the two. And of course, you have elephants in eastern India as well. So, Elephants of the World. This is a lovely bit of artwork done by a friend of mine from Green Humor. His name is Rohan. So, you get an idea of the various different subspecies of elephants. You can see the Bornean elephant, Sumatran elephant, Sri Lankan elephant, Indian elephant, African forest elephant, and African bush elephant. But essentially, the two on the left are African elephants, and the four on the right are Asian or Indian elephants. And another funny cartoon on the right, just to give it a little bit more clarity. But right now, essentially, they are just subspecies, and we have two species of elephants currently in the world. But what is the difference? What do you mean by African elephant and Asian elephant? So there are a couple of differences. I've marked them out for those to read, but I'd like to point out certain things. The African elephant, you can see the one on the right. The ears actually are much larger. In fact, I like to think of it this way. I think the African elephant's ears are shaped like Africa, whereas the Indian elephant's ears are shaped like India. So that is one way to remember this. And a double domed head for the Indian elephant, whereas there is a single rounded, single dome head for the African elephant. Apart from this, the the trunk, the long nose that elephants have, at the tip, the African elephant has two fingers to grab onto leaves and branches, whereas the Indian elephant has one finger on the tip of the trunk. Another very, very important major difference is that tusks are found in both males and females in African elephant, whereas in Asian elephants, tusks are found only in certain males. I'll talk more about that in the coming slides, but for now, remember, tusks are found in both males and females in African elephants, whereas in Asian or Indian elephants, the tusks are found only in certain males. And of course, another big difference is that African elephant is almost 1.5 times, almost 150% bigger than the Indian elephant. Okay, so here we have a herd of female Indian or Asian elephants with a young male calf. So you can tell automatically the females don't have tusks, whereas the young calf has a tusk. But if you look at the photo closely, In the back, on the top left, you can see a big male elephant with a big tusk. It's out of focus in this photo, but you can actually see the tusks of a big male elephant, what we call tuskers in India. So this picture was taken in Kaziranga National Park in eastern India, which is part of the Grand India Wildlife Tour, which is the only tour in India which you do where you can see wild elephants. So let's talk about elephants a bit more. So these are tuskers or tusked males. So males, some of them have really, really massive tusks. But one of the distinctive features of male elephants is that they have a very pronounced forehead. So in females, the highest part of the body is the back of their the back crest, whereas in male elephants, the highest part of their body is always the forehead or the double dome on top of their head. So that's one way to know whether it's a male or female, especially when we are considering elephants which are tuskless. But before we talk about tuskless elephants, look at this guy. So this is one of the most popular elephants in South India. So he is not a very big elephant, to be honest, but his tusks are like no other. He has tusks which almost touch the ground and cross over, which is very, very interesting. Very unique individual, and one of the, I would say, an icon of the Indian jungles. On the other extreme are these maknas or tuskless elephants. So tuskless elephants are quite common, especially in Sri Lanka and certain parts of India also. And we don't know why some of them are tuskless yet, but we know that this much, that they're very unpredictable, they're very hormonally charged, and they can be aggressive at times. Sometimes they can be more powerful than a tusked male elephant, probably because they need to show more aggression, more power to be in the selected by females, or be able to survive a territorial quarrel with another male. So maknas or tuskless males are also a regular feature in which is seen in Kaziranga National Park on the Grand India Wildlife Tour. So here you have a good picture showing a fight between a tusker and a makna. You can see very clearly the pronounced foreheads. You can see the larger size, and very importantly, you can see the one on the left is a tusked male, whereas the one on the right is a tuskless male. We don't know if it's actually an advantage or disadvantage to have tusks at the moment, because both of them do just fine. But we have seen that the tuskless males are generally more unpredictable and a little bit more aggressive overall. So there is a particular time of the year, not necessarily a specific time, but it comes once every year for elephants. It is called the time of must. And if you want to translate it in a very simple term, I would say this is when male elephants are erotically charged. They are at their they are totally charged up to show their power, their strength, their aggression. They're willing to beat up, break everything, break bushes, break trees, and they will do this till they are able to find a female herd to where they can copulate and uh, uh, forward their gene pool. Also, this is also the time when they have some very, very serious fights between the male elephants, sometimes even leading to the death of the rival. So moving on to herds. So when we talk about herds, we're generally talking about females, young ones, and subadult or young adult males. We are not talking about large males because they usually stick by to themselves unless it's the time of must, which we just spoke about. So herds in India usually migrate large areas, over hills, over sometimes over cities, over roads. They go, some herds cover as much as over 1,000 kilometers in their journey to find food, water, and great safe grounds for their young ones. Some of them are even known to go to certain specific places to give birth to young ones. But not all elephants migrate. There are also ones, especially the big males, who stay behind in one area and wait for the herds to come to them. So this elephant is a very popular elephant in the hill town near me. He's a favorite for all of us. He's seen by all of us on a regular basis. He's sometimes, this is the ticket counter to the national park. So one morning we couldn't even enter the national park ticket counter because he had blocked it entirely. He's a very peaceful, calm elephant, but he has no fear. He's lost all inhibition of people and cities. You can see him roaming around in the middle of houses, going here and there, but he's not caused any problem till date. So elephants like this tend to stay back and stay in one place through the year, simply because they're used to it and they know the herds will pass by. And very often it can also be because they found a great source of food, usually a banana plantation or a vegetable grove or a trash dump, sadly. So, why do elephants migrate? So, we spoke about various reasons just now, but one of the main reasons is that elephants are large animals. They need a regular supply of food, almost 100 to 150 kilograms of food a day. This is because they digest so little, they process so little food of what they eat. A lot of it goes into their dung, so even the elephant dung has so much undigested material. So elephants need to make up for that and eat so much more, and they need to eat different things. For that they need to move very, very large areas. If they stay in one place, what happens is they empty the forest and they starve to death. So they have to keep moving for their own sake and for the sake of all the plants that need to grow back to sustain them when they come back. So in this picture, you can see an elephant feeding on grass. He's using his trunk to take out the fresh grass that has come after the first rains and eat it. So he uses his feet. If you look below the elephant, you can see a lot of brown areas just below near his feet. So he scrapes the ground with his feet and then uses his trunk to take these delicate blades of grass and feed on it. Elephants can do this also. They might look big, they might look sluggish, they might look like they're not built for steep slopes, but they are really the ATVs of the jungle. They can go to incredible heights, they can go to slopes which you can't imagine to get to food. So here, after the rains, there's a really nice bunch of grass clumps that have come out, and the elephants have come to feed on them in these areas. And of course, elephants very often come into plantations. Here you can see an elephant getting on its hind legs to get onto jackfruit, which is a favorite for them. Another thing I've seen elephants move to find is salt. Because of the amount of green material they eat, they need sodium to digest. And for this, they go to various areas, especially places which are rich in limestone and chalk, to lick the ground to get their salt fix. They also feed a lot on bark. We look at bark as just protection for the trees, but bark is also rich in nutrients because very often the nutrients flow just below the surface of the bark in the trees. So elephants very often are seen using their tusks or their trunks to strip trees of their bark and feed on it. And where I live, one of the main reasons for elephants to come here is the amount of bamboo that we have. So elephants come here, especially during the first rains, when the new shoots of the bamboo come out, and they seek out these shoots, and they will come and break them and feed on them. Especially the big males, they love breaking down bamboo and feeding on them because this is a very, very good nutritious source of food. And the main thing is it's available in plenty in places like where I live. But unfortunately, not all elephants depend on wild sources. There's very often elephants are figuring out that there is a great source of food if they're just willing to venture into human areas, whether it be rice fields, whether it be vegetable groves or sugarcane fields. Elephants are slowly starting to figure out how to get in, how to navigate the solar fences, how to be quiet when they're raiding crops, and how to disappear back into the jungle. So this is becoming a slow problem, elephants moving into human areas to find artificial or human grown sources of food. And this has also led to some very interesting behavior. What you're seeing here is a band of five males. Five males, which is a very rare sight. But these five males have started to group together, some Makanas, some Tuskers, and raid fields together. In fact, one of them, actually, I've seen one of them stand on one end of the field, attract the farmer's attention, attract all the people to try and chase it away, whereas the other four get in from the other side and raid the field and disappear all five together. This is something very unique, very incredible, and it is definitely an adaptation of elephants to crop raiding. And this is a very funny picture. There's also a herd of elephants in a highway close to where I live who figured out that all the sugarcane that is grown on one side of the hill has to go to the big city on the other side through a narrow mountain road. So they know that all they have to do is stand in the middle of the road, stop these trucks, and feed on the sugarcane straight from the trucks. Why bother raiding fields when you can have food delivered to you right where you are? And that's what these elephants are doing. So when you have a large animal moving through great areas and feeding on multiple things and requiring a lot of food every day, and when you keep in mind a country like India with 1.4 billion people, there is bound to be a lot of conflict. There's a lot of development for the people. Elephants' areas are shrinking. Their food sources are limited now, so elephants are roaming new areas far and wide in search of food. In fact, one very interesting example is that in the Grand India tour, which we do in India with the NATAM, uh, one of the areas we go to didn't have elephants for the last 200 years. The first park, Bandhavgarh. But since COVID, a herd of 70 elephants have moved into that park from the nearby state and surprised everyone. So now you have elephants in two parks instead of just one on the Grand India Tour. And that is something very exciting for all of us. But also, it's very alarming because elephants are now trying to figure out new places where they can be safe, find food, raise their families, and also make sure their lifestyles are intact. So, scenes like this are very common where I live, very common in the Himalayan foothills, all the areas where there are a lot of people and there are a lot of elephants. And unfortunately, scenes like this are also getting common. I'm sorry about the graphic detail, but I wanted to give you a real picture. Elephants very often are considered enemies, especially by agrarian or farming communities. So whenever they see them, they try to chase them off by using any means necessary. And sometimes, very often, I shouldn't say sometimes, very often it leads to death on both sides, both on the human side and on the elephant side. So, what is the solution? The Indian government has decided to capture as many of these conflict elephants as they can, and they're trying to capture them using other domestic elephants to herd them into trucks, to herd them into cages, so that they can be put away in camps and be trained as domestic elephants. Is that a solution? I'm not too sure. But before that, let me give you a little bit of history. So, elephant capture is something that's been a tradition in India and South Asia for the longest time. Elephants, of course, were used in armies, in battles. They were used for logging. They were used heavily for construction, including the construction of the Taj Mahal. So, almost all the rulers had over 300, 500 elephants in their army, which they used regularly as a major force when it comes to battle or constructing megastructures. So here you have a scene where this is a scene from an elephant capture. You can see how this is an old painting of. Unfortunately, we have no photo documentation of this, but they basically herd elephants into this big area and use domestic elephants to rope them, capture them, subdue them, and then take them back to a place where they can be calmed down and domesticated. This is the truth behind all domesticated elephants. Some are born in captivity, but most have been caught in the wild in the past. And this is usually the state of those elephants as soon as they come into captivity. They are put in these structures called krals, where they are put on a low diet, where they are made to feel dependent on humans through the initial months. And then finally, when they are totally calm, they are then totally under the control of humans, because psychologically they believe now that humans are the one. They have to be obedient to the humans, and that's the only way they are able to feed and live a healthy life. So this is kind of the psychosis behind domesticating a 3-ton animal, uh, and making it listen to a 70 kilogram or 130-pound human being. And this is also a sight very often. Unfortunately, this happens, but these days people are being more vigilant. It doesn't happen anymore because baby elephants, as cute and as naughty as they are, they do get heavy very quickly. Within 5 years, the elephant can be strong enough to cause some serious damage to a human being. So if a 5-year-old elephant continues to be playful, It is dangerous for the mahouts and everyone around the elephant camp. So they have to make it calm in a very forceful manner. Unfortunately, this is the truth behind domestic elephants. And I've been witness to this many times in India and even in Thailand and Sri Lanka. So life in captivity for an elephant is not all bad. They are fed well. Some of them are kept in great outdoor spaces. Some of them have other elephants to interact with. They do little chores around the camp. Unfortunately, like these days, we don't use elephants to transport anything because we have trucks and roads. But they're still made to walk around a little bit and do some work so that they are not don't become overweight. So that is also a thing, and they were used in the past in the timber industry, but nowadays they are not used much, and most of the elephants in camp are just there very often as a tourist attraction, but very often also as how do I put it, as something that's forced on the elephant and on the camp people because they have been a conflict elephant in the past. So, domestic elephants, the dark ages, people know. We've talked about tiger conservation in my previous talk. Elephants were used heavily in tiger hunting. All the Maharajas had their elephants, and they used this to kind of please the British officers to get like benefits for themselves. They used it to make sure the British officers had them in their good sights, and elephants were a big part of this. They used to use elephants to corner tigers, and then the British officer or the Maharaja will come and shoot the tiger at point blank range. And this is kind of the truth of that. But after independence, after the creation of Wildlife Protection Act, elephants became very crucial in monitoring tigers, which is still being done even today. Though that will become obsolete in the coming years because of the drones and the technology that's advancing. But in the initial years, for people to study tigers, they realized that elephants could go wherever tigers could go. So people could actually follow tigers for weeks, months, years together. Researchers, scientists, conservationists, to understand the tiger better, to understand the area better, understand the populations better before the invention of camera trapping and everything. Elephants were extremely important in monitoring India's wildlife. Domestic elephants were very important in monitoring India's wildlife. There's also another side to domestic elephants. They bring in a lot of revenue, especially in countries like Sri Lanka, Thailand, India, and a few other countries in Southeast Asia. They use camp elephants as a great way to bring in tourists where you can bathe and feed the elephant. I'd like to think most of them are kept in great conditions, but I know of instances where they're not. Like this situation in Rajasthan, which is the hottest desert in India. Here, there is a fort where there are over 150 elephants, which are made to take tourists up and down the walkway of the fort in 50-degree heat, in walking on hot stone. So, this is something that's unnecessary, but this is also the truth of captive elephants. There are organizations working to rescue these elephants from these areas, but of course, organizations like NatHab and many others are being very careful and advising people not to encourage this. So when the people who own these elephants aren't able to make money, then they will look at other options or giving away the elephants to an elephant orphanage or a place like a rescue center. So we are working towards that, but unfortunately, this still goes on. This is the dark side of domestic elephant tourism. A simple example from India, and there are a few from other places too. But in India, there is one other angle to elephant conservation, or even the perception of elephants in India, is because of Ganesha, who's the elephant god, a very popular god. So elephants are revered in India as a holy animal, but it is not the entire story. So India is mostly has Hinduism, which is almost like 70% of the population. So along with Hinduism comes the love for the elephant god or Lord Ganesh, which means that elephants are very often kept in temples or in religious institutions because they become a great source of revenue for the temple, and it also gives a layer of authenticity for the pilgrims who are visiting the temple. So very often the mahout is given some money and the elephant blesses the pilgrim, as you can see in this photo. So this is one elephant in a town in South India. But there are extreme cases where there are big temples, like big institutions. You can see, you can even perceive them to be something in the lines of the Vatican. Such big institutions where they would have 50, 60, 80 elephants in the temple complex, and they use them for festivals, as you can see here. All the golden foreheads you see in the center, the line, are all beautiful large male elephants, which are handpicked by the temple to make sure that they are the ones carrying the idol of the god when he goes out on a procession or a parade once every year. So a million people, or maybe even 2 million people, come to see this festival. And you can imagine how stressful this can be for the elephant. So we do perceive the elephant as a holy animal, a spiritual animal. We consider it to be akin to the elephant god or Lord Ganesh. But somewhere the whole idea seems to be lost in translation. Me being a Hindu myself, I can vouch for this because I've seen all manners of horrors. I was part of an elephant survey, a captive elephant survey, a couple of years back, and I got to go behind closed doors and see the plight of these elephants. So they are decorated like this during the procession. They go through a lot of stress during these times. Imagine the amount of noise, the religious chanting, the sounds, the smells, and very often the elephant loses its mind and gets, especially the ones in must, lash out. And very every year, at least there are one or two incidents where elephants go berserk and harm people, and then very often the elephants are put down or they need to be tranquilized. So it's a big mess every year. And part of the reason is because these elephants, outside the time of the religious festival, are kept in conditions like this. And this is the area of the temple where they hold the elephants. And this is a very, very hot place. So the elephants are kept tied up in a very, very, very hot open environment, no shade, no shelter, basic food. So this is the reality of these elephants that we perceive to be god for one day in the year during the procession. And during the rest of the time, they are kept like this in conditions like this. And this is the sad reality when it comes to elephant conservation in India. And this is also the problem why the idea of elephant conservation cannot progress much in India, because no one has the heart to take on, or no one has the bravado or the heart to take on a religious institution of that scale. Even a politician or a conservationist won't do it, because that there will be immense backlash and loss of support. So this is the Indian problem. We have elephants who we love, who we cherish, who we have many stories to tell our children about, who we talk about on a daily basis, who we love to see in the jungles. But there is also a dark side to elephant conservation, which is extremely financial, partly religious, and driven by man's greed. This is the story of the elephant in India. But there is, if you can believe, I'm going to tell you one small incident which you might not even imagine could be the truth. There are elephants in the Bay of Bengal, which is the sea which is to the east of India, in a line of chain of islands called the Andaman Islands. Here, elephants were brought in many years ago by the British to help them with their logging operations. And some of these elephants have also been trained to cross between the islands by swimming across the ocean. Some of you would have seen pictures of elephants doing this. They're very famous. Now the logging operations are stopped, and most of the domestic elephants have been shifted to the mainland. But what is the problem is, you see this red dot here. The red dot on the right is the Andaman Islands, so far away from the mainland. And there's one island called Interview Island. So Interview Island is a large island in the Andaman Islands. The islands have over 200 different individual islands, the archipelago. But Interview Island, unfortunately, has over, I think the exact number is around 80 to 90 uh, feral elephants. So elephants which have been brought for logging operations have been abandoned on this island. So these islands are biodiversity hotspots. That means they have endemic frogs, endemic birds, endemic mammals. So when you have 80 large elephants trying to survive in this remote island, what they're doing is they're going and cutting down the rainforest, making meadows for themselves so they can feed and survive. and this island is so remote that they're not able to move out. So now in this situation, what do? We are trying to protect the beauty of the island, the biodiversity of the island, the endemic species of the island. But now we are in a conundrum because there's another important species which is causing havoc all over there. And the cost of transporting those 80 elephants, capturing and transporting those elephants to the mainland has become so high that it's almost impossible to do. And on the flip side, these elephants are now totally wild and extremely aggressive. Anytime they see a human being, they try to chase them. So we don't really know what to do. So there's a stalemate in this island. Do we protect the species native to the island? Do we try to do something to protect them? How do we get these elephants out? Do we even try to get these elephants out? Do we need to put the elephants down? How do we do that in a country which worships elephants? So this is the kind of problem that we face in India with elephant conservation. And this is also the reason why elephant conservation isn't growing leaps and bounds, unfortunately, in a country like India with one of the largest elephant populations in the world. So this is the problem between Andamans and India. This is a problem which has been being debated for the last 20 years. We still don't have a solution. No one wants to touch it because imagine you're the one who signs off on killing 80 elephants. You're going to be a villain to the rest of the country. Imagine if you let it be. That means you're letting an island and its endemic species die, and you don't have the funds to transport or capture those elephants. So what do we do? So this is a unique problem which is unique in fact to one island in the world. I'll put it that way. There is no other story of this sort with elephants being stuck in a conservation battle. So having said all that, I've given you a little bit of a grim picture. I've given you a, I shouldn't say grim picture, I've tried to give you a realistic picture. But the truth of the matter is, elephants are overall doing well in India. Their numbers are growing. They're moving into areas where there were no elephants in the past, and they're going into those areas now. Like there were elephants, they were not there for a long time in between. Now the elephants are coming back. They're breeding well. They're feeding well. The situation of ivory poaching or the ivory trade is totally controlled in India, so it doesn't happen anymore. So overall, there is a lot of positives, but we can do so much more, is what I'm trying to say. And the roadblocks are very simple, but very complicated because of the country that is India. This kind of summarizes the elephant in India. Again, a cartoon by a friend of mine, Rohan, from Green Humor. You all of you must visit his website. It's the most beautiful, most creative stuff that he comes up with in terms of cartoons like this. He is very creative, and this cartoon strip, I think, absolutely summarizes what the elephants go through in India. Obviously, there's no ivory trade anymore. There are no more circuses, but the rest of it still happens on a daily basis, even to this very day. Thank you so much. That's all I have to say at the moment, but I want to know what all of you thought of it, and I also want to know if you have any questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Surya. Now, before we start in with the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in your control panel. All right, let's get to some of these questions. All right. So, is there ever a situation where an elephant with the tusks could become a hindrance to them, say if they're crossed?
Absolutely, yeah. So that's one thing which I said. We don't know whether it's an advantage or a disadvantage. A tusk being an elephant, it's like the tail feathers of a peacock, right? You should think the peacock becomes like an easy target for everyone. There are such heavy feathers on its tail when it's trying to display to the female. We kind of wonder why they have it, and especially the big elephant I showed you earlier, the one who had cross tusks. I would assume he is at a disadvantage all his life. It is a heavy weight on the neck. It is a heavy weight on the head. I mean, it can be really hard. But to be honest, at the moment we don't know whether it's an absolute disadvantage or advantage, because mating privileges if the tusks give them mating privileges, then that is an advantage that any amount of disadvantage kind of nullifies. So that is how the animal kingdom works, right? It's about choosing the brightest, strongest mate. And if an elephant has big tusks and that is a criteria, then that works. And that, irrespective of the disadvantage as otherwise, it works. And we do have elephants who we've seen them use their tusks very well to like strip bark, to like get to fruit, or even like use it as a needle to poke into jackfruits and pull them out, or because sometimes the trunks can't grab them effectively, so they use their tusks also. So there are advantages. And another interesting fact I'll tell you is, like how most of us are left-handed and right-handed, elephants have a preferred tusk which they use every time they want to do something. So elephants can be left tusked or right tusked also.
That's very interesting. Um, so, do females also feed on tree bark?
Yes, they do. The females also feed on tree bark, but they may not be able to get to the hardest parts. They will probably look for existing damages on tree bark to use as a fulcrum to feed on it, or very often they will find a tree which has been already fed on by a male, and then they will go and feed on that tree. So they generally but they will find it hard to strip bark of an intact tree, but if there is some damage to the bark already, they'll be able to use that point and then peel off the bark from the tree. Yes.
Great. Thank you so much for that. So, how did India handle the ivory poaching situation? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So there was heavy poaching of ivory for the longest time in India. India is actually one of the biggest suppliers. In fact, India had one of the most skilled craftsmen who made these beautiful things out of ivory for the longest time. In fact, illegally it went on till the 90s, if you can believe that. Many years after the ivory ban. But eventually, a lot of the trade routes and the mafia behind this trade have been captured and subdued and sidelined. So that trade doesn't happen in a large scale, or in, I would actually confidently say in any scale anymore. But like most of you would have heard of Project Tiger, which saved India's tigers, there was also a Project Elephant, which tries to save the Asian elephant, and the ivory ban came in along with the inception of Project Elephant. Of course, the international ban on ivory, collaborating with all the countries in the world which have elephants, of course, was a big boost to this. But unlike Africa, where ivory poaching is still rampant, in India, I would say it's heavily controlled. But the problem in India now is there is still so much stock of ivory in, let's say, even in government depots, and even in some of the craftsmen still have so much ivory that they're trying to get rid of in the black market. And sometimes even a corrupt government official. Very often we hear reports that termites and a go down fire destroyed all the ivory in a forest department or a government stockpile, which was seized earlier. But very often it could mean that they found a way to get rid of it or sell it off on the side for some money on the black market. So I can say confidently that elephants aren't being actively killed in the scale they were before for ivory, but ivory trade in the black market with the remnant ivory which has been seized in the past, I would say, is unfortunately still active. So that's why there's this new protocol where if you find a dead elephant, you remove the tusks immediately, even if it's a natural death, and burn them. But how often they do that, I do not know.
Thank you for addressing that. So, has domestication slowed down at all?
Unfortunately, no. Uh, though we know that there are less and less reasons for domesticating elephants, it is all financial. There is, of course, the need to capture some problem elephants, but the amount of funding a camp gets depends on the number of elephants it has. Even a government approved camp or a wildlife department camp, if they have a domestic elephant camp and if they have 10 elephants versus if they have 20 elephants, they get double the funds from the government. So that kind of is the bottom line, which you need to know to understand why or how or why the elephant capture industry is still so rampant.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. So technology and drones, like drones being used in national parks, will that have any effect on the captive elephants at all? Will that help
That
them
will have
move?
effect on the roles of elephants for sure, but I'm not sure it will affect whether elephants will be stopped from being captured or whether elephant capture as an exercise will be stopped. So that's what I'm trying to say. They're two different topics, though they seem connected superficially. I believe the usage of elephants or usage of domestic elephants versus the actual need to capture elephants and domesticate them are two very different topics. And the one is one talks about elephants being used for tracking tigers or saving forests or monitoring forests. That is one side which is active for now, but I'm sure it'll be obsolete soon with the drones becoming cheaper and more common and more effective and more accurate. But on the other side, what happens to all these camps and the mahouts and the people in charge? What happens to these funds? How will they stop? They will stop coming to these camps if they show that they have less elephants. So we don't know, but I can confidently say they're two different topics entirely.
Gotcha. Thank you. So, as far as crop rating goes, have they tried natural inhibitors such as honeybees and chili peppers, things that they do in Africa?
Absolutely, absolutely. Some of them have worked. Solar fences usually work, electrical fences. Bees have worked on occasion. Chili powder and chili powder fences definitely work. But having said that, you're talking about a huge area. And I'm talking about a really massive area where elephants come. And there could be 2,000 farms over there. And maybe 200 of them are equipped well enough to protect themselves. The rest of them may not be. And very often the elephants figure out a weakness even in the most well protected farm. Like I know there is a herd of elephants which knows the weakest point in a solar fence, and they push a tree on it because they know if they push a tree over there, the current in the fence stops, the electrical fence stops working, and then they walk on the tree that they've pushed to get into the farm and do their damage. So, and they can be extremely quiet. I mean, we look at them as these big animals that should be obvious wherever they are. When you're walking in the jungle in India, an elephant can hide in like, even amongst like a low scrub jungle because they're so good at being still and being quiet if they need to be. So it's quite incredible how smart they are when they come to raiding crops. But yeah, these measures are effective to an extent. Very often they work, but some herds have figured out how to do it. But the bottom line is most farms haven't been able to afford it, or it hasn't been provided to all the farms in area because India is a big country with a lot of people. So getting everyone these measures hasn't worked out or hasn't panned out the way it should have been yet.
Thank you. Do you know of any current efforts underway on a national level to help protect the elephants?
Well, they are trying to legalize the elephant corridors or scientifically mark these elephant corridors. When I say corridors, what I mean is the routes elephants use on their migration. So with the elephants who are like migrating animals, right? It's not like protecting the tiger, which can live in a sanctuary. Elephants need vast spaces, and very often those spaces may not even be inside forests, which they cross. So very often elephants pass through towns, railway lines, roads, highways, everywhere. So education is a big part of it. So the officials are trying to educate the people who live amongst elephants. They're trying to change cropping patterns for the farmers in those areas so that they can grow crops which the elephants don't come for, especially during the migration season. And apart from that, they're also trying to kind of protect these corridors and reduce the industrial or human impact on these corridors so that elephants can continue to walk these routes for many, many years. That's why the collective noun for an elephant is always a journey of elephants. I mean, we always use the common term herd of elephants, but the actual collective noun for elephants is a journey of elephants. And we are trying to make sure that the journey stays intact. and that is a important measure. Obviously, a lot of things when it comes to a large mammal which roams through big areas outside forests is politically driven. A lot of it is down to politics, what the locals want. Some people want elephants, some people don't want elephants to come near their houses ever again because they can do a lot of damage. And politicians use these situations to their advantage to get votes. So yes, there is a lot being done, but is it enough to make sure the elephants live a peaceful life, a less stressful life? I'm not sure yet. But these are the measures that are being taken care of, protecting the corridors and educating people.
Great. Thanks for letting us know. So, often when we're looking at photos of elephants, we see a lot of birds around them. Can you tell us why there's so many birds around the elephants?
Well, well, in this picture specifically, the elephants are actually in a marsh, so the birds were always there, and the elephants have come. But very often, what happens is when a large animal like an elephant moves, even in Africa, you talk about oxpeckers who move along with elephants, because the elephants kick up so many insects as they walk. They disturb trees, loosening the insects. They disturb the ground, bringing out the worms. So when birds follow them, they are able to get easy access to prey, which otherwise they'll have to dig for or scrape through foliage for. Now all of it comes out when an elephant is going about doing its daily things, and that is, I would say, the reason why birds follow them. But very often, uh, I'd also say this, that elephants come to marshlands such as this, or lakes or rivers and pools where there are birds already. Elephants come here to feed on the fresh grass, the reeds, and also to cool off at the end of a hot day.
Well, speaking of water, what keeps an elephant afloat? Can an elephant swim?
Yes, it's buoyancy. It's the same as us. They can swim. They're very good swimmers. They don't sink like how we don't sink. And they're instinctively good swimmers. We are also instinctively good swimmers, actually, as human beings. But unfortunately, we are put in so much fear as when we grow up as a child that most of the fear of water is external for us during the times we are of our formative years. So, uh, uh, like that, elephants, even the baby elephant I've seen, can get into water and be on its own. So yes, they are very good swimmers. They swim across oceans, like I showed you in the earlier picture. I can go back to that picture. Yeah, they swim across oceans. I'm talking about 20, 30 miles of ocean between two islands. They can swim through that. Yes.
That's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Um, so, what are the main predators that elephants need to watch out for?
Well, in India, very often elephants die only of natural causes or injuries caused by fights between elephants. But for subadult elephants, female elephants, and young elephants, uh, tigers do often try to get them, and very often they do, because tigers usually what they do is they go and claw at the hind feet of the elephant, especially if one gets separated from the herd, make sure they can't walk or follow the herd on their journey. And this elephant is because its hind feet are so damaged, it just falls down, and the tiger is able to eat it when it's alive. So tigers, in fact, there's a tiger in near where I live, which has killed three elephants in the last few months. So, and I'm talking about a tigress. So tigers are incredible in that way. I mean, we talk about a pride of lions in Africa killing one Cape buffalo, and here you have one tigress bringing down a gaur, which is a large Indian bison, or an elephant, or even a rhino by itself. So that's what I would say is the main predator of wild elephants, or the natural predator of wild elephants in India. Yeah.
Surya, can you share the website again for your friend who creates the elephant cartoons?
Yes, it's called green humor.
Green Humor.
Green green humor. That's it. Greenhumor.com.
Thank you so much for that. Well, unfortunately, that's going to be the last question that we do have time for today. So I'd like to hand it back to you for any closing comments you may have for us.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you everyone for joining in. This is a topic which is very close to my heart, and very often I'm not able to speak about it when in India, because I'm usually surrounded by people who could be religious, who could be offended, or who could be uh, for this, against this. Very often there are people affected by elephants because of their farmlands or some kind of conflict. So it's not a conversation we are able to have openly in India at the moment, but I'm glad I'm able to share it with you guys. So whether you travel anywhere in the world, uh, especially South and Southeast Asia, be conscious of these things when you visit a center which is working with domesticated elephants. Wild elephants is a different problem. I could even say wild elephants are not your problem, but where you can contribute is by traveling responsibly to places which are conscious about the way they treat elephants or the practices that they follow in choosing what elephants to capture and how they treat them and how they let them be within their ground. So be very conscious of that, and that will go a long way in helping save these incredible animals. Thank you so much.
Surya, thank you so much for talking so frankly about this topic. Our guests are very appreciative of that. And I'd also like to thank everybody who tuned in today. Now, if you are interested in information on how you can travel with NatHab, please give us a call at the number on your screen, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We will see you next time.